Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Many individuals commonly perceive themselves as being powerless in the face of life circumstances, merely reacting to unfolding events. Could our hidden intentions be shaping the outcomes we experience? If so, can we make our intentions conscious and influence our reality? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to explore the power of intention is Finnian Kelly. Finnian is the author of Intentionality, a groundbreaking guide to breath, consciousness, and radical self-transformation. He's a successful entrepreneur and a retired officer in the Australian military. As the founder of Intentionality Inc. and leading breathwork facilitator, he provides the transformative tools and frameworks to have an expansive human experience. His website, FinnianKelly.com. Finnian, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thanks so much, Gwilda. That was a beautiful introduction. Thanks for really introducing it that way. I love the probing questions.
Thank you. So I understand you are a retired officer in the Australian military. How did your military career impact your views on intentionality?
Well, the military is a very powerful organization. And when we look at how the organization runs, it has a bunch of programs running that's coded into you through your training to make you go do things that probably you, in a rational sense, you probably wouldn't want to do. As a young man, you actually get excited about the prospect about going over to another country to fight in wars, potentially having to kill someone, also risking your life. And you do that in a way that you're actually wanting to do it. Now, if we understand the spiritual path, that is not in our nature. It's not in our nature to want to cause harm to others or risk our own life. But the way they actually code us through understanding how the mind works is powerful. And I understand why they do that, because otherwise no one would want to actually do that. So what I really learned there was, one, the power of programming or coding. And also, I learned a lot about leadership in the military. I learned how it's so important to have an ability to understand your own vision and then articulate it to others to get other people to follow you. But I also learned how quickly people can justify things, like justifying why I can be miserable for a few years in order to get that great posting in the future. And I just saw all these things play out at a very young age. And I'm very grateful for that, because it gave me a great perspective throughout the rest of my entrepreneurial journey.
So it seemed kind of diametrically opposed to personal intentionality to be programmed.
Yeah, that's definitely right. Like, I really feel with intentionality, the role is to become conscious that we all are programmed. Doesn't matter how perfect your parents were or the place you were living in. By nature, we're all programmed.
That's
And
socialization in a nutshell, isn't it?
exactly, it is. And our role is to become aware that we have these programs running, and then to identify, are these the programs that we want to keep running, or we would like something else? And really, ultimately, what we're looking for is a certain feeling state. And most of our programs are not leading to the state that we want, that feeling of peace, love, and joy, which I think are the three highest states. And what's beautiful about this is it brings awareness that you actually do have the agency to change. You don't have to be a hostage to your current situation. If you're not liking how your life is looking, there's a way to actually break free of the structure that you're living in, which is very liberating when you actually receive that.
So we spend the younger portions of our life being programmed, and then we as adults have to take on deprogramming.
Yeah, effectively. But the problem is most of us don't want to actually face that. Most of us aren't even aware that that's even happening. We just think, oh, this is actually what I wanted. But when you get down to the core, and this is why self-reflection, self-inquiry, space to actually explore your inner nature, you start discovering, maybe this isn't the way. Maybe there's potentially a different way. And that's something which I get the privilege of exploring with people every day, to just give them that little possibility that they don't have to buy into that story that they're living their life by.
So, would an example, say, for instance, be a person chooses their major in college based on what makes money versus what is their joy?
Totally. I'll give a personal example. I grew up in a family where my mother's side were all doctors. So that's what we really knew, was that doctors were this great group of people who earned a lot of money. But so then by nature, my friends' parents were also doctors. And because we were academic, that was at our school was focused, well, medicine's the hardest thing to get into. So because you're a top academic person, then naturally you have to want to be a doctor. And then we'd create these stories about it's going to be so great, we're going to earn all of this money. And I internally knew that medicine did not bring joy in my family, but the conditioning and the programming was so strong that even when I said I wasn't going to apply for medicine, I still did. And then I got into medicine, and for a moment, I got this validation from my mother, from my family, from my friends, and we were in this group collective where it's going to be so amazing to go be doctors. But everything inside of me was telling me the opposite. And I accepted medicine, and thankfully, a divine path where something else came available. And at the last minute, I chose a different path, which obviously was to the military. Now, the military wasn't my highest path, but it was the path to get me out of the medicine journey. And that coding is so strong. Like my younger brother, unfortunately, he did follow the path and he became a doctor, and he was miserable, so unhappy, and to the point where he was questioning his life. And then he actually left, and still there's family members who still wonder, when is he ever going to come to his senses and become a doctor again? And it just fascinates me. I'm really, it's been the greatest life example of just seeing how strong those bonds are. And this is happening in religion. This is happening in anything. People think, oh, this is what I want to do. And I just ask them, is it really? Have you ever
Or is it what
actually chosen that? Yeah.
has been taught to want? So, what religious ideologies and practices do you incorporate into your views?
Great.
Speaking of religion.
So what I did, I love to get to truth. And truth is a funny thing because someone's truth can be someone's completely different truth. And that's because generally what we call is truth is perspective. Now, what I wanted to do is, what is a truth in all situations? Because that's really what a truth is. It has to be universal. So I started reading all of the different spiritual texts and literatures. And at their core, I found a lot of similarities. Ultimately, that we're here to realize we are love, and to give love, to receive love, and to come back to love. That was a core thing. There was a nature of we're here to grow and to learn certain things in this physical body. We're here to serve our fellow humans and realize that we're not separate, that we actually are one. We're here to play. That's why we have this great human body, and we get to have the five senses and to really bring them out. And then we're here to create. We're creators. And that's what I really bring back into intentionality, is like, what is the core that connects us? Rather than in a lot of religious texts where there's some separation that comes up, what brings us back to oneness? And that's what I bring forward through these practices. And this is what I love about this work is that no one can argue with it. Like I've worked with every religious group, I think, and no one can argue with what's in this book, because at its core, it's actually speaking about the truth that they know at their core, that their religion comes from as well.
Well, we live in a world where for millennium, religions have been the cause of war. Okay. People's
Mhm.
arguing over whose truth is the truth. So, how do the very religions or ideologies that you mentioned here harmonize rather than clash? And how do we start focusing on that?
Yeah, I think what happens is we need to go back to what was the real message, rather than the literal message by particular words that could be corrupted by certain humans, which are egos. Effectively, an ego is this false narrative of who we are. I could talk about negative belief loops in the book, but that's what an ego is, a collection of false narratives. And anything that creates separation cannot be true. So when we say that we're fighting over my God over your God, anyone can just go, well, that doesn't really work. And so how do we come back to connect to what are we at our essence? And when we realize that we are the same person as the person that we're potentially hating over there, then it reminds us, perhaps it's our mind which has been corrupted that needs to be evolved. So this is why I love to bring the breath back into everything. When we breathe, we are taking a moment, we're suspending the story in the mind, and we get to just be in the present moment. What's also interesting is when I breathe, and across from you, Gwilda, we're breathing in the exact same airs, same particles, and that goes through our body. So effectively, is there a separation between us? Or actually, are we the same? And if we just all started collectively breathing together, everything would harmonize. There would be naturally a different frequency. And so the whole path that we need to be doing is to move to the path of connection rather than the path of separation. And we do that through being curious, through having compassion, through seeing ourselves in others, and realizing at our core, we're all wanting the same thing. We're all trying to just live a good life. And the person over there that you're judging, they're just trying to survive. And maybe if you were in those circumstances, they would do the same.
It's that wonderful moment we have to take a commercial
Oh, brilliant.
break. Finnian and I will return very shortly, so you don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. What is intentionality anyway? With us this hour discussing intentionality and manifestation is Finnian Kelly. Finnian is the author of Intentionality, a groundbreaking guide to breath, consciousness, and radical self transformation. So, Finnian, there's the question. What is intentionality as we're going to be speaking of it here?
So intentionality is a feelings first approach to living in leadership. It's a methodology of how to identify how you want to feel and then taking incremental steps towards making that a reality. And you'll see that feelings are really a core part of this. And it sounds weird. We're like, what? Why would we want feelings? I want certain material things. I want a house. I want to be a CEO. I want to have all this money. But if you actually ask someone why do they want that, it will always come back to a feeling state. So rather than waiting for some arbitrary achievement to happen to get that feeling, what I want people to do is how can we connect to bringing that feelings into the present moment, and then also doing the action steps to bring more of that into your life. And when we do that, life can be incredible. Life can really transform quite quickly. And what it does is it gives you the agency to start designing and co-creating life with divinity, rather than just being the passenger, rather than being the reactionary of the conditioned programs.
So which comes first, the feeling or the situation?
So I believe the feeling is what can come first. Now, it's a belief loop that ultimately they all lead to each other, but we can change any state by just changing our perspective. I teach a lot of different breaths and a lot of different meditations. And so often people think they're in a hostage of a situation, but we can bring awareness to another part of our life and even just completely forget about the situation we're in right now. All we have to do is just take a few regulated breaths and then bring forward a memory of some time when you felt peace, love, and joy. And suddenly your body will be feeling those feelings and you won't be worrying about that particular situation you're in right now. So whatever we feel is what we will materialize out into our life. And that's why we flip the script, is just go, let's prioritize feelings over outcomes, which is the master key of intentionality.
So you're saying that we can actually control what we feel. How does gratitude fit into that transformation?
Yeah. So with the controlling, we can control, but at the same time, we also just need to allow the feelings. That's a lot of the time what happens is we have an aversion to an unpleasant feeling and we try to suppress it, numb it, or express it. Instead, we actually just need to feel it in order to integrate it. And once we do, then we release it. Then we can bring our awareness onto the feelings we desire. So gratitude is one of the highest emotions that we can connect to. What it instantly does, it opens ourselves up. If we connect to a place of gratitude, you'll notice our breath regulates and it goes slower, deeper, more open. Our heart will open up. And in that place, we just feel more open and expansive. And when we're in a place of gratitude, suddenly our perspective of life experiences changes. You start viewing life through a different way. It's that saying like, oh, that person views life through rose-colored glasses. That's a person who's living in gratitude. Why wouldn't you want to look at beautiful flowers and roses? Would you rather look through life looking at weeds all the time? And that's really this big part of this journey, is just bring the perspective on the things that serve you.
So we tend to be conditioned, if you will,
Mhm.
into seeing the dark side of things. Like, then you won't be surprised, then you can prepare. But in so doing, are we not focusing and bringing forth a shadow side versus finding balance?
Yeah, you're right, Gwilda. There's the ego. And when I talk about the ego, is that false narrative of self is constantly trying to justify its own existence. It only lives in this current state of turmoil. It doesn't care whether you're thriving or just surviving. All it cares about is whether it exists. Now, it constantly creates stories of, oh, you have to be careful of this, you have to do careful of this. Now, there is a hardwired programming, because back in our early days, it was a survival instinct like that. We had to be aware constantly. Life isn't as risky as it used to be anymore. So that hardwired program is still viewing everything as risk, thinking that we're in a survival-based place, but we're not actually there anymore. So what we need to do is start looking at, like, how could this be good? How could this be easy? How could this be possible? And I just went to an incredible wellness conference on the weekend, and there's a few things that lead to longevity. And one of them is, are you an optimistic person? People who are optimistic, view life through the glass half full, they have better opportunities and they live more healthier. Even though the other person who lives negatively, sees everything through the glass half empty glass, they are doing because they think it's actually protecting them, but it's doing the opposite. Because generally what we bring our attention to is what materializes into our life. So it's better for us to go, oh, I see my premature programming coming through, which is trying to protect me. But that's right, I'm not in survival anymore. I don't need to worry about that, because I have always been safe. I have always been provided for.
So yeah, I kind of view, as from listening to you, that there's this kind of continuum where you have the positive and the negative, or the negative view and the positive view. If you go too far either direction, like the rose colored glasses, thinking everything's fine when maybe there's something really needs to be addressed, or thinking everything is negative and denying yourself anything positive, can't they be equally harmful?
Yeah, they definitely can, Gwilda. There's something which I call the fantasy, that people love to live in the fantasy. They're creating all these stories about the future, and that's because they don't actually want to accept the present moment. The challenge with fantasy is as we get closer to the fantasy not being achieved, the fear starts creeping in, and then it starts hijacking us, and that's when we get really in a bad place. So I actually see people do super harm by fantasy. The key is just to be with what is, not create any story about it, and go, what is true in this moment? In this true, yes, my mind is saying, oh, I'm at risk. I'm going to be, completely financially desolate. I'm going to have no love. I'm not going to live. But actually, in this present moment, I'm breathing. I'm completely fine. So when we come back to that present moment, we let go of the stories. So yeah, I agree. I much prefer going in the middle way. One of my favorite texts is the Tao Te Ching, which is a Chinese philosophical text, and it's all about the middle way. Don't get caught up on the highs or the lows. Just be in that middle place. And what we start realizing is that even the idea of positive and negative, that's just perspective as well. Like if you think of a temperature scale, I always ask, like, when on the temperature gauge does it go hot? And people go, what do you mean? I go, well, when is it suddenly hot? And they'll be like, oh, I don't know, maybe 70 degrees. Well, that might be for you, but in Jamaica, that might be 100 degrees. It all depends on your perspective. And that's why we say you're only 1 degree separation from living a different life. If you could see in this moment what you think is really bad and challenging and actually realize, oh, this is on a spectrum of negative and positive, how could I view this as actually happening for me rather than happening to me? And that's one of the greatest moments in life, is we actually start celebrating the tension and the friction in our life, because that means we're actually growing. We don't want it just to be perfect all the time. That would be a really boring life.
So from what you're saying, the moment holds both the positive and the negative, and there's both positive and negative in everything. So to be an alchemist, you need to measure out equal balance there.
Exactly. And whenever you're in an experience and the negative feelings start taking over, honor them, integrate them, feel them fully. And you'll notice when you feel them, and the way to feel them is just to be present, connect to your breath, and just sit with them without trying to send them away or resist them. One, you'll be shocked how quickly they move through. It's just energy dissipating. And then what happens afterwards is sometimes you'll see a different perspective. Suddenly you'll be like, huh, I just got sacked, but maybe that's finally the opportunity I get to start my business that I've always wanted to. You just never know. And that's what people do, is if you look back at people's hardest times and you ask them, would you give that up? They will always say never, because that was when I grew the most. So knowing that in reflection, imagine when the next time tension comes up, you start being curious and go, oh, how is this serving me? Suddenly everything will change.
It's like the finest songs ever written, the most amazing poetry, the most amazing books usually came from a person in the middle of their darkest hour.
Definitely. I was just coaching someone who is in a really happy relationship, probably should never have been in that relationship, but been in it a really long time. But because of the structures of society, she's going through all the shame of going, well, I'm not a good Christian woman if I leave this relationship, and all these challenges. And I just reminded, I went, this book was written from literally my darkest times where I went through a divorce. And now look at everything I get to do because of that experience. Now, it was still super challenging, but wow, you have no idea what's coming on the other side of this experience. But what I do know is if you stay in this experience, I know exactly where that path's leading. It's going to just be leading to a path of a miserable, unsatisfied, living an inauthentic life. But here, if you choose the path of love instead of a path of fear, there's possibility. And that's all we have to focus on. That's why I say you don't need to know how this plays out. All you need to just decide is, are you choosing the path of love or choosing the path of fear? And then just watch what materializes.
It's pretty difficult sometimes, though, to tell which is which, isn't it?
It is, because we get tricked. And often we think, oh no, this is the loving thing. But if we find ourselves justifying, it's generally the path of fear. When we just drop in and just ask for God, give me guidance, or I just ask my body, it always knows. There's no justifying. There's no pros and cons lists. Like, that was one thing she said. She said, should I do a pros and cons list? And I went, no, that's the mind. Like, like, let's really connect to that. And if you operate from that place, it starts getting sharper and sharper. And eventually you can trust your intuition. People, and this is what I think you were touching on, Gwilda, a lot of people confuse their intuition with fear. They have trained a fear program to hijack that, and they go, oh, this is my intuition. And I go, no, it's not. That's fear. That's not your intuition at all.
Well, we're going to have to talk more about intuition, because that's such an important topic.
Mm-hmm.
Finnian and I will be right back to continue our discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Do bad habits create your reality? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing habits versus intentionality is Finnian Kelly. His website, FinnianKelly.com. So, Finnian, let's talk about habits.
Mm-hmm.
Where do habits play in here?
So really, habits are at their core of intentionality. How we get coded is through impressions, through repetition, and enough behaviors. So in a belief loop, we have our core belief drives up these certain thoughts. Then we act on those thoughts through behaviors, and those behaviors lead to feelings. And the way the subconscious takes on directions, which then reaffirms the belief loops, is through the strongest emotion, through those feelings. So we have a variety of habits. Some serve us, some don't. And the way to tell if a habit's not serving you is to go, is it bringing positive feelings or negative feelings? If you identify that every time you eat, you start feeling critical of yourself, that's potentially a habit that isn't serving you. Where if another person, they're just like so grateful after eating a meal because they know they've nourished the body, they probably have a good habit. So one first step is to become aware of what habits do you have running. And then you have to go through a process of going, all right, am I willing to do the hard work? Because by the nature of a habit, it's there to save energy. It's making our life easier. Then to break that habit, we have to use some energy, unfortunately. So there's always going to be a resistance at the start. For example, myself, I'm doing a parasite cleanse right now. I did a GI test and I discovered I had a parasite inside of me, and it required a very intensive protocol of 90 days of no gluten, no sugar, and these different herbs and these experiences. Now, I had a habit of eating dessert after every meal. I love just a little sweet taste. And that was obviously not going to work for this protocol. So there was a natural resistance after dinner. The mind would be telling me, oh, you need your sweet thing right now. So in that moment, rather than trying to fight it, I would just sit there and actually feel that. I would be like, okay, I'm going to honor that craving right now. And then after a little bit, the craving would dissipate. Then after enough days of doing this consistently, it wasn't getting the feeling state anymore that it was getting before. And it created a new habit where now I don't think about that at all. It's just a natural habit. But there is, by nature, you have to go through that resistance change. So it's not that habits are in conflict with intentionality. Where intentionality goes one step further is, are you conscious of your habits and are they serving you? And then what do you do with them?
And we're all habit, right?
We all are. Yeah.
And I
And
mean,
we're
that's what we're
grateful.
conditioned to be, right?
Yeah.
This is the way you do it.
And we also need to be thankful for our habits. Like, imagine if we had to think every single time we wanted to brush our teeth, we wanted to do all these rudimentary things each day. It'd be exhausting. So I'm very grateful for a lot of my habits. And then I also see, this habit's interesting. Where did this slip in? And that's what happens as well. Something happens. We get exposed by media. We get enough impressions, and then suddenly a new habit's formed. And that's why we constantly have to be aware in this game. It's not good enough to go, oh, I'm perfect. Now I don't have to do anything the rest of my life. Life events occur and they knock you off. And before you know it, you're a different person again. So we need to keep doing this practice of self-inquiry.
It seems to me, though, that sometimes we, probably more than sometimes, identify with our habits to where this is just who I am. This is just how I am.
Yes, that people love saying that. This is who I am. I'm just hardwired that way. And that's where you hear the language like wired. Like, no, that's a form of coding. And we are not anything. All we are is innocence. I just had a baby boy 11 weeks ago. So it's been this beautiful experience to watch this all play out. And I look at this little boy come out. He's just pure innocence. He doesn't have any perspectives, any stories. He's just this love being. But then over time, what happens? If I'm not loving to him, I put him in through different experiences, he'll start questioning that and start making up these stories that he's not that. Now, I know at his core, I've seen him. This is the innocent little boy. So there is no such thing as that's just the way I am. That's just a protection mechanism. And it's offloading responsibility to really look at yourself and go, is this serving me? Am I willing to release this? And yeah, I don't think I've witnessed anyone who's just that it is. Now, of course, we have some core traits. Like there's some people are just more bubbly and effervescent, and then there's others who are more very introspective. But the only thing I think we can really say we are is we're all innocent beings who are through our life experiences create different stories about ourselves, and we lose connection with who we really are and, more importantly, what we are. And then our life journey is to rediscover what we are.
It's quite an assignment. You spoke a lot about breath. Can you explain why breath is so important in intentionality?
Yeah, so breath is incredible, isn't it? When we reflect on what is life, when we come out of the womb, that first breath represents that our baby's alive. And then if you've ever had the privilege of seeing someone cross, it's this moment where they'll build up energy through breathing, and then eventually they take one big breath out, and it's like, and it means that life has finished and crossed into the next realm. It's also the one thing that we can't live without for the shortest amount of time. So there's something about that. Another part of breath is it's happening just automatically through the autonomic system. We don't have to think about it. Our breath is just regulating everything. And when we breathe in, we combine oxygen and glucose, and then it creates energy. So it feeds everything. However, we can also consciously control our breath. I can suddenly go, all right, I want more energy, and start breathing up more. I want to relax myself. So I want to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and I want to do more longer, slow breaths, and I can change my state. So what I realized is breath is our friend, and breath is our tool that's always with us. It's free, and we can use it to change both our psychological state and our physiological state whenever we want. And ultimately, what we're trying to do through becoming conscious is to, rather than let the automatic program run through, which is those habits, which might be causing you harm and causing other people harm, we can take a breath when we're triggered or activated and stop that automatic program, consciously override the program and go, I'm not going to do that behavior. I'm instead going to do this behavior, which will lead to more of a positive state for myself. And that's where we start taking back agency of our life. And that's why I always say you're one breath away from intentionality, because if you just take that one breath and stop that automatic program from playing out, you might change your life.
Can you reverse engineer that? In that, can you suddenly stop and pay attention to how you're breathing to figure out, kind of get a pulse on how you're doing?
Yeah, that's something I do regularly, and I recommend it to all the leaders I work with. We think there's a lot of leaders out there who love to say, I'm a rational being. Feelings have no place in the workplace. And I just go, you're lying. That's not true. All we are feeling-based human beings. When people say that, all they've done is disconnected themselves from the feelings, and they're actually more dangerous. Their feelings are impacting their decisions more than anyone else because they're not aware. So what our role is our breath is a cue. Our breath will tell us what state we're in. So if we've been triggered and we're going into a fear-based program, often what you'll find is our breath might stop, or it might be constricted. It might be really short, shallow, fast. And often we don't, because we're so caught up in the stories of a life, we aren't aware that this has happened. If we're in a loving place, your breath will be more open, more expansive, deeper, longer. We'll feel more relaxed. So what we can do is to check in and just scan ourselves and go, what's my breath doing right now? Oh, interesting. It's really short and sharp. It's fast. Maybe I'm in a fear-based place. Now, it's very important to know whether in a fear-based place or a love-based place in life, because by the nature of being in a fear-based place, what happens is those really old programs, like the hardwired programs in us, goes to a survival based, and all it cares about is, all right, have you got enough energy in your legs to run away from this threat? So literally our blood flow goes away from the important brain, the decision making parts, and get away from our gut and goes into our legs in order for us to run. So literally we become dumber during that process, which you can imagine if you're in a leadership position, you're making decisions, you don't want to be operating from a lower consciousness, because then you could put everything at risk. So our responsibility then is to go, okay, I acknowledge I've gone in fear. I don't have to stay in that state. I could start using the breath of a love-based fear, which would get me back into that place. And then you might start getting the blood flow going back into the places you need. And then you might find that the decision, which was so hard, actually isn't so hard after all. So it's a great tool to just keep checking in. Where am I at?
It seems like that the society we've built up and the media and everything else is kind of designed to keep us in fear. And but from what you're saying, it keeps us stupid and controllable.
That's exactly it. Fear is people think fear is a great motivator. What it is a great controller. It can motivate for a very short, finite amount of time, but it doesn't have a sustainable burst. Where love, like people do extraordinary things for love. Think of all the things that people do when they're in a romantic relationship. They're willing to quit their jobs, go travel around the world, do anything, because that's the power of love. They are willing to, if you've seen a parent who's going through a period with a really challenging child, they'll find great depths to get over themselves because of love. So when we're in that fear-based place, yes, we're very impressionable, we're controllable. And by nature, we then get controlled. And you see what's happening in the media, and we're on election day right now. It's playing on that. They literally tell us with clickbait and everything, like, we want eyes on. Our natural default is we'll buy into the negative stories more. So let's just keep feeding it. And that's one of the challenges in the world. Everyone thinks the world's so bad, but that's because we're just getting delivered this information rather than actually looking at the facts of the place. There's a lot of beauty in this world right now.
There is, and it's time to take another station break. Please stay with us as Finian and I continue to explore the transformative power of intentionality. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Are you in the right brainwave state? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Finnian Kelly. His website, FinianKelly.com. So, Finian, let's talk brainwaves a little bit. This is assuming we have a brain. But what brainwave states are there, and what do they do?
Yeah, so right now we're in most likely beta. Beta is a high frequency wave, and this is a place where we're in it. We're making decisions, we're using our thinking brain, and it's great in these engaged moments. However, if we stay in that state, one, it's quite exhausting, and we're really only accessing our conscious mind. When we relax our brain waves, and the way we do that is to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So there's two nervous systems. The sympathetic is our active, it's the fight and flight, which we get engaged, and it's great. We can run away from things, we can run towards things. It's a powerful force, but it also can get you tired. We need to also activate our parasympathetic nervous, which is our relaxation. It's our calm state. So we do that by elongating breaths out, taking nicer, longer exhales than the inhale, and naturally our parasympathetic nervous system gets activated. When we do that, you can imagine just sitting back into a nice reclining armchair, and you've just got a nice drink, or you're just looking at a nice view, and you're just taking a few breaths. You notice you just become a little bit more calmer, more relaxed. And in that place, what happens is you start opening up the doorway to the subconscious. The subconscious is that habitual program, that hard drive of programs, which is really making 95% of our daily decisions and behaviors. So it's very important to become aware. It also is effectively a supercomputer. It can work out things so much quicker than the conscious mind. So we want to be able to access that. So that alpha is that great place of relaxation, also a great place of contemplation. It's a great place to go, like, who am I? What am I? Or I've got this problem, and we start allowing the problem to come to us rather than thinking we need to solve it. It just comes through us. It's that state that a lot of people are in when they're in the shower. And you know how a lot of people say, I have so many great ideas in the shower. That's because you weren't thinking. You were getting out of the thinking mind and relaxing, and then this incredible wisdom starts coming through you. Then we start relaxing even more, and we get into theta. Theta is where our brainwaves are really quite slow, and it's a place that's very akin to that drowsy place just before sleeping. We naturally get into it twice a day. Every time we fall asleep, just before we fall asleep, we're in theta, and every time we wake up, we're in theta. This is the place where the conscious mind is nearly turned off, and it's just subconscious. It's automatic programs. My baby right now is in permanent theta, just in this place. And in the theta, this is where we're most programmable, because there's no conscious mind filtering. It's just going, let it all in, absorb, which is great. That's how babies learn to survive. They're looking around, okay, how do I fit in this world? And they just start absorbing everything. It's great when we're aware of this, because then we can use this brainwave state to start coding our subconscious to bring the programs in that we want for our life. So if we want to feel more love and joy, peace in our life, then we go to bed feeling that way. And then our subconscious goes, oh, they feel this way. I'm going to create more of that. The danger side of it is that's also the place that we often get into when we're absorbed in TV. When we forget that we are not in the TV program and we're absorbed in it, that means we're in theta. And that's when things are just hitting us. Same when we're looking at a phone. We're just absorbed. We're just taking on all these different programs in that we might not be aware of. And then when we go to sleep, we go into delta. Delta is that place of deep relaxation. And when we're in that place, we can access what I call the universal mind, which is this unified field of intelligence. And that's why a lot of people, they have a problem and they go to bed reflecting on it and they wake up and the problem is solved because they access this universal intelligence that can come through them. And then there's another brainwave state, which is gamma, which is like this intensity state, which is like almost when we're in these peak flow moments. So why we need to become aware of this is different acts in our life, different like methodologies or different states of being, we need to be using different brainwaves. We don't want to be in really high beta if we're in a loving moment. We want to be more relaxed and be more present. If we're trying to solve a problem, maybe it would be better to get into a theta place and then connect to this intelligence that could come through us. So we can do this regularly. And once we start understanding these brainwave states, we can use them to really create different scenarios in our life.
Well, I know that shamanism is a practice that's worldwide. Okay, it's been around since the dawning of time, and that's exactly what the shaman does: is controls his brain waves. We found out, and access access information that most people don't have access to, and it tends to play out. It tends to be very, very accurate. Do we have the capability, as just your lay people, to use breath or whatever to enter these states and get information that we don't have access to otherwise? And how can we know if we're there and can rely on it?
Oh, great. I'm so glad we're going there, Gwilda. So we all do have access to this. That's the thing. We're all the same. We're all living in the same universe. Most of us have disconnected ourselves from it. And that's because of these different programs and these different habits. So we can use the breath just to regulate everything. The simplest form is to go down the brainwave states is just to keep lengthening the breath on the exhale. It's all about the exhale. So many people will tell you to take an inhale in, but actually what we need to be doing is let's take an exhale out. Let's let all the air out and then slowly bring air out in and then bring more out again. And the more we lengthen them and make them slow, so we might start with 3 seconds in, 4 seconds out, and then we go to 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out, and we keep doing that. We keep being more and more present. We'll notice we'll start going from beta to alpha to theta. And when we're in that place and then we bring forward positive emotions such as gratitude, love, appreciation, we effectively connect to this source that the shamans have been doing to for a really long time. And we don't try to do anything. We just allow it to come through us. Suddenly we get new perspectives, new insights. And that's where all the great inventors, all the great scientists like Albert Einstein lived in this. And this is what's so funny is that we use science all the time to say, oh, science doesn't allow feelings or it doesn't allow for the mystical. Actually, that's where all the greatest science has come from. And then they back it up through empirical data and they go through a research, but it all came through some intuition at some point where they went, I wonder if this is possible. And then they get an insight that it is, and then they go try to work out and prove it on how to make it happen. And then the rest of the minds catch up and they go, oh, great. And we're seeing that right now. It's a really beautiful time because science is catching up to these things that intuitively people have been operating for thousands of years. And it's funny because now it's legitimizing it and people are jumping on. But what was true? Did the science make it true? Or was it already true, but the science has now just made your mind willing to accept it? And that's why I always just say, don't trust me, try this on. Like you can't question when you go through a breath journey with me, you'll have no doubt that there's something bigger than you, that there's something more available to you. You'll also feel more peace and love and joy than you've ever felt before. And it was not through an intellectual understanding. It was from a deep experiential knowing.
So it's that time in the show when it's getting close to the end, but also I get to ask you, Finland, what is your mission?
So I call it my personal legend, which I got from the beautiful book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And the personal legend is like, why are you here? And for mine is to help people find their way by returning them back to a path of love. So I believe that we were born in this loving state. Like all you have to do is just look at a baby and they just love you. They're just laughing. They're just playing with you. And people naturally, when you return back to that state, you will find your way. So I'm effectively a love activator. I just want to, here's some love for you. Here's some love for you. Here's some love for you. And then people get a little bit of resonance of that and they feel it. And then maybe then they start giving it to other people. And if all of us just started giving a little bit more of that, we would stop creating this separation, start coming together, and these ideas of wars and everything would just drop away. So that's really what I want to do. And for me, myself personally, that requires me to keep exploring, keep getting to know myself better, and keep learning how to love more. And it is a continuous process.
It's a really great mission. And isn't it a continuous process to shed who we are not to uncover who we really are?
It is. It's not even we need to discover who we are. We just need to let go of the the veils of illusion and just keep exploring. And at our core, we know what we are. We just forget it sometimes. And that's the path of constantly coming back to your breath. And even my mind will take me many times a day. And that's where it is. It's for the first time. Every time, even when you've felt it and you've felt that divine moment and you know what you are, quickly the mind will forget it. And you need to come back and keep going through that practice. But it gets a little bit easier every time. It doesn't take weeks, it might just take a day or maybe an hour if you're lucky. And life just gets a little bit sweeter, a little bit more enjoyable, and a little bit more playful when you do.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Finian, thank you so much for coming on the show, all the way from Australia, and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks so much, Gwilda. I've loved the depth of this conversation.
Our guest this hour has been Finnian Kelly, the author of Intentionality, a groundbreaking guide to breath consciousness and radical self transformation. To find out more about Finnian, where you can find his book and all he has to offer, visit his website, finiankelly.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join me right here next time as this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.